President. Let's see, for President's statement, I'll just keep it really short. I read a really interesting opinion piece in the Half Bay Review.
Could you turn the volume up? We can't hear you, Scott. Please.
Is this better?
Try it.
I did. Is this better?
Not really.
I think you're all being heard on the mic that's at the podium. You're all the same sound. I don't know if your mics are working individually.
Let's hang on. Let's attack. That was going to be. All right, Jim, is this any better?
No, it's not any better. It's not any good for me. I don't know.
Okay, how about now?
Oh, that's good. Now it's good.
That was better.
It's because I'm 1 millimeter closer to the microphone, or because our friendly guy from PCT found the right thing to do. Thank you for that. Okay, for my. No, there's a menu popped up. We can't see the audience. No, just click away. Okay. All right. So there's an interesting op-ed in the Half Moon Bay Review. I'm just going to provide a very short response to that, and that is it would have been very helpful for that very lengthy opinion piece to have mentioned somewhere in there that a suit was filed, considered by the court, and Half Moon Bay lost. Their claims were not upheld by the court in a well-written, well-considered, rather lengthy opinion that came with the judgment. So if you happen to read it, just remember it doesn't really reference the most important thing, and that is they lost the lawsuit. All right. Do we have more comments for items on for anything that's not on the agenda? I see Greg Diegas.
Yeah, hi. Funny you should mention it. I'm going to be on the news, the radio tomorrow, Coastal Windage with Michelle Dragety, and I'm sure this is going to come up. I wonder if you could just educate me quickly on what neighborhoods are currently served by IPS flow. This isn't really part of the MCC report because I'm speaking as an individual here. I know it's Frenchman's Creek. I know it's the Cherry Stem. What were the other neighborhoods that are on and providing sewage to Half Moon Bay entities? Do you remember what those are?
Clemens, is any part of Miramar in there?
Yeah, I mean, there is, I think everything on the Naples pump station, everything, and pretty much, I think the most southern portion is Nurseryman's Exchange, they changed names.
Rocket Farms.
Rocket Farms.
Yeah.
So I can think of Rocket Farms, Frenchman Creek, and ultimately all sections of Miramar.
All of Miramar. Okay, I wanted to be clear on that.
Go down to the plant somehow, yes.
But if I could say something, Greg, first of all, you're going to be on KHMB AM 1710, FM 100.9.
Michelle knows better than I. Yes,
that is correct. And if you go to KHMB, you can also listen to it online if you have internet.
But half the piece that Scott was referencing also is only referencing a portion of Half Moon Bay because the neighborhoods you are referencing are served by Granada Sanitary District. So Half Moon Bay is conveniently taxing its citizens who live in Granada Sanitary District by bringing this lawsuit and then appealing the lawsuit.
Yeah, you're right. I just wanted to get at the claim that Deborah Penrose put in that and in a prior article a couple of years ago that Half Moon Bay receives no benefit from the IPS when in fact it serves several of their neighborhoods, in addition to the wet weather storage issues and so forth. So I just wanted to be prepared with an accurate statement on that, and I appreciate you taking the time. I'll be writing an article on this in the Buzz, and I'm going to be writing a letter to the Half Moon Bay Review. I suspect I will not be alone.
Thank you, Greg. Any other comment for items not on the agenda? Catherine?
I think it will be exciting tomorrow to listen to this at 9 a.m. on 1710 a.m. and KHMB, also 100.9 on FM and on the internet. And by the way, they have lots of other good shows, and it's our own, very own local radio station, so it's worth talking about. I will say watch the SAM board meeting on Monday night. It starts at 7. We may be starting a little late. We have a closed session starting at 6:30, but to talk about this budget deal. And there's going to be some interesting, if not repetitive, discussions. I'm hoping we can that the Granada Community Services District and Half Moon Bay will join Montara in passing the SAM budget, because SAM is the #1 public health agency on the coast. It keeps our beaches clean, it keeps our streets clean, and it makes it so that we can all live here. So please watch the meeting. I can't tell you what's going to happen, but it could be exciting. Then again, it could be really boring and we'll just pass it and I'll say aye and we'll go on.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We now have a public hearing with a review and possible action concerning transition from at-large to by-division-based election.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So as the title says, we're in the process of switching from the current at-large election system to district elections. So we're going through our first districting process. There was already one informational hearing in April, and that is available through PCTV or on YouTube. So anyone who has not seen this, please watch this. There is some good information that was provided. We are working with redistricting partners who's helping us, and Elizabeth Stitt is here with us tonight. And I'm just going to hand this over, but I'm going to say the staff recommendation, since it's a public hearing, is we have to open the public hearing. And that, I think, is essentially after the staff presentation, allow for relevant testimony, and then close the public hearing, and so on, direct staff accordingly. Okay, so thanks, Elizabeth. If you can please take over.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me back. Good to see everyone. As Clemens mentioned, this is meeting number 2. It's directed toward the public. So this is our public outreach meeting. It's going to be a little repetitive from last time, but I did try to add more new information, and we will be talking about how the public can get involved. So last time we talked about what's districting, so we'll be covering that and the traditional redistricting principles used to guide the process. And of course, we'll be talking about the laws associated with it, and then how the public can participate. We'll get into the hearing structure and then next steps. So I'll mention later, this is the second meeting, and so that means that it's the last meeting before you get draft maps. So you'll be getting draft maps at the next meeting, and we'll talk about that in our next steps. And then last time somebody asked about small districts and how they did it. So I wanted to just briefly talk about some of those small districts that we've worked with or heard of and how they did it. So what is districting? The whole reason why we're here in very simple terms, it's just the initial process of creating election district boundaries. So really what this does is it determines two things. So who is eligible to run for office and who can vote for those people running for office. So right now in an at-large election, clearly everyone in the district votes for all of the members. But when it goes to districting, only one person can be elected per district, and only the people who live in those districts can vote for their representative. And these are the redistricting criteria that we use. This comes directly from the Fair Maps Act, that is state law. It applies to cities and counties, but we do look to it as best practice for special agencies and school districts as well. So first and foremost, each district has to be relatively equal in size. And that essentially means that it's under a 10% deviation. And I'll be getting more into what that means when I show you the maps at the end. And then each district has to be contiguous. So that means that it's one whole piece and we're not going from one part of the district to the other. There are two different types of contiguity. There's literal contiguity and then there's functional contiguity. Literal is, as you can probably guess, is when you look at it on a map, it's all touching. It makes sense when you see it. However, functional contiguity is if you look at a map and you know that there's a mountain dividing that district, and it's preventing people from traveling from one side of the district to the next, then that would be an example of non-functional contiguity. So these are some aspects that we want to think about when we are districting. So here is an example of something that is non-contiguous. So if you look at that purple district, you'll notice and hopefully you can see my mouse, you'll notice this portion is not touching the rest of the district. So it should be with D, but it's off on its own little island, and that would be considered non-contiguous. This is an example of functional contiguity. So you can see this line right here. This is actually a railroad line. And what this does, it prevents most of the city from being able to cross over that boundary. There's only 3 thoroughfares here. So what we did was use this as a boundary. And so now it is functionally contiguous. So you can go from one side of the district to the next without having to go around. And then, of course, you want to make sure that we maintain communities of interest, and we will be getting more into that in a moment and spending more time talking about that, because that is really where the public comes to shine in this redistricting or districting process. And then we want to make sure lines are easy to identify and understand. So, for example, that railroad line, that would be an example of a man-made boundary. And following city or natural boundaries like rivers and stuff like that would be considered something easy to identify. And then, of course, keeping districts compact. I wanted to show an example of that. So in many states, there are laws that are more mathematical in their assessment of what is compactness. California doesn't do that. In the state of Idaho, what they do or what they did was they outlawed funny shapes. In California, the definition for compactness isn't either of those things. I think it's a little more eloquent. It is you don't want to bypass a nearby population for another one if they share similar interests. So here's an example of something that is considered non-compact. This is the city of Martinez. And when they first districted, this was their map. and advocates sued over this map. And then when we did the redistricting, this was the new map. So you can see the huge difference here. Communities of interest were kept together. The highway is used as a barrier, something that's a lot easier to understand. So hopefully that's a good example of what compactness is. And now I want to get into maintaining communities of interest. Like I said, this is really where the community comes to shine in this process. Obviously, I will be looking to the board to define a lot of these communities of interest, but I will say that people who live in the communities are the ones who are usually the best to describe their own. So hopefully we will be getting some community members to comment, and I know that we already have had some comments from community members, which is wonderful. So a definition of a community of interest is it's a group of people who are like-minded, share similar policy concerns, and would benefit from being districted together, and they are geographically close to one another. So when we're thinking about it in this districting process, we want to know things like what sort of culture or characteristic do they share? So what's bonding them, and why should they maintain together during this districting process? And then we want to make sure that they're mappable, that they have a certain amount of density so they can take up a share of the district. And then of course we want to look at their relationship to the agency. So how are your decisions as the board, how does your decisions impact their representation? And then, like I mentioned last time, we do like to look at communities of interest as the building blocks of districts. So the whole purpose of looking at them as a community of interest is to maintain their voice so they have a stronger ability to advocate for themselves with their representative or at the voting poll. And like I mentioned last time, there are communities covered in the Federal Voting Rights Act. So Latinos, Asians, and African Americans tend to be the three most common that we see in California. But importantly, race cannot be the predominant factor when we're drawing district lines, and I don't foresee that being an issue here. I like to share this example or these examples just to show folks how diverse communities of interest are. So it really does have an array of interests and policy concerns. So for example, historical communities and tourism areas can be considered a community of interest. Some of the most common ones we hear are downtown versus rural areas. Those areas have very different needs, especially when you think about water. Homeowners and renters, very common. Languages spoken. So when you think about languages, these are how people access their services. So it goes well beyond neighborhoods. So hopefully we'll be getting some feedback from the community about some of these. And I talked a lot about what a community of interest is, and real briefly, I'll talk a little bit about what it is not. So under the Fair Maps Act, it does prohibit these groups from being considered communities of interest. Now, again, this only applies to cities and counties, but we do look to this as best practices. So political party affiliation, incumbents, and political candidates, and those are there to help ensure that districts aren't being created as gerrymanders. And then the next part, it's not prohibited, it's just really hard, if not impossible to draw. So groups of similarly minded people who share similar policy concerns, but aren't located in the same area. So you might have an advocacy group for left-handed people, and they're just trying to find a pair of scissors that works for them at their local government offices, right? But left-handed people live throughout the entire district, so we can't put them in one area to make sure that we are protecting their voices. They're too spread out. And then, of course, communities of interest that are district-wide. Again, we want to make sure that we're protecting people's voices, and if they're district-wide, we wouldn't be able to put them into one district anyway. And these are the questions we like to ask the people to sort of prime them before they start, giving their own testimony. So first question, how or what characteristics, culture, or bond does your community share? Next question is the community geographic in nature? Can your community be mapped? And then how would you describe your community's relationship with your jurisdiction, and how is it impacted by the policy decisions made by your elected officials? So those are the questions we like to ask people, and folks have an array of ways to be able to participate. Of course, they can participate at meetings like this. So speaking directly to the decision makers is often very helpful. However, I totally get it. Not everyone likes speaking in public or has the time for it. So emailing the district is really helpful. So there's 3 questions that I asked, or emailing a map would be just as helpful as speaking tonight or in future meetings. And then, of course, drawing maps. So we did prepare a district-wide map with population, trying to follow the census blocks as much as possible for people to draw. And this should be available on your website. If not, you can definitely email and ask for it. But you can see that there is, and this is a double-sided PDF. So on this side, you can see census groupings of population. And what you'll do is circle the population that you think should be considered one district and add it up to about 1,100 people. You can look more closely at the streets, and hopefully that looks better when you actually look at the PDF. It's hard to see on my screen, but you'll actually be able to zoom into, well, on the piece of paper, look at these street names with the population. And these maps are actually incredibly helpful. We've districted the city of Davis and Napa using these maps from a public submission. And we always encourage the public to draw their own maps, if not just for a fun creative activity, but they literally could be turned into your next districted map. So getting into the public hearing schedule, like I mentioned earlier, this is meeting number 2. So this is an important one because that means at the next meeting, you'll be getting your first set of draft maps. And I do want to reiterate to folks that this is a iterative process. So when I give you the maps next time, I don't expect them to be complete. I'll give you 3 different draft maps for you to have different options and view which ones you like best. And tonight, of course, you'll be giving me direction on what you do want to see. But what we'll do at the next meeting is we'll look at the maps, review them. You'll let me know what you do like and what you don't like. And then we'll focus on the maps that you do like, and then work on changes from there to get it to a point where you feel comfortable voting on it. And of course, if you don't like any of the maps, you can throw them all out and ask for me to redraw it. And of course, we do have the map drawing program on my computer. We don't usually like to do live drawings, but push comes to shove, we can always do some live drawing as well. Now, before we wrap up, I did want to mention just a couple of case studies that from districts that were very, very small. I know that last time I mentioned a school district that redistricted and had a difference of 1. That example was Clay Joint Elementary School District. This is their map. They only had 7 census blocks. You guys probably have closer to like 50 or something like that. And when we take a look at their population data, literally it's a difference of 1. And I do want to emphasize that each small district is really unique. But one unifier is that census blocks do tend to dominate the conversation when districting, because the number 1 priority is making sure that every district is relatively equal. So as long as we're under 10% deviation, it's considered relatively equal, but sometimes that could be difficult to achieve when we do not have census blocks working well with us. This is the city of Bradbury. We did not district them, but I do want to show you an example of a city that has less than 1,000 people, and they've been redistricting since before, I believe, before the California Voting Rights Act was enacted. So you can see that they have a total population of less than 1,000 people. For the most part, their deviations are two people, a difference of 2 people, 5 people, 3 people, and then 1 that is 12 people. And that gives them a total deviation of 9.2%. Still considered relatively equal, as long as it's under 10%. So a lot of jurisdictions tend to be afraid of having a higher deviation. But I think in this case, it's totally fine. So I kind of expect that we might be having an issue like that, where we'll be on the higher side of the deviation. But really, when you look at the actual numbers, it's not a huge difference. It's a difference of 12 people or so. So that is my presentation for tonight. And I will hand it back to the board to open public comment, and I'm happy to take questions as well.
Okay, I hereby open the public hearing, and members of the public, do you have any testimony? Anyone? Members of the public.
You're strangely quiet.
I'm looking for raised hands either on video or through the Zoom interface.
Lisa.
Yes. Hi, Lisa. Lisa Ketchum, please.
Unmute.
Sorry. I have real mixed feelings about this whole thing. I've noticed with this redistricting, like with the school district, the harbor district and everything, you hardly ever get to vote. I mean, you only get to vote for the one person, and the other stuff you got no say in it at all. And so it's annoying for that reason. And then also, I just feel like Montara and Moss Beach, are you kidding? How are we 5 separate communities of interest? I just wanted to speak to the issue of Pillar Ridge, which is a unique community in that we are homeowners on rented land. And most people don't even think of this concept, but it is really a unique situation, and as evidenced by the county passing a rent control ordinance for mobile home parks, not for apartments and houses or anything like that, just for mobile home parks, because of this unique economic situation where your largest asset is your home, and yet it's rented land. And in this case, of course, Pillar Ridge has been treated as one customer, and you know my issues with that. But I would hope that Montara Water and Sanitary would not require districting in order to accommodate the special situation that we have at Pillar Ridge, to include that in your garbage franchise agreement as a, you have single family homes, you have apartments, you have commercial, that this significantly large community with a whole different economic base deserves special consideration. So as far as your maps, I realize I haven't really said anything except obviously Pillar Ridge needs to be one thing, but whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have any other comments from, yes, Clemens?
We received a comment from the public via email. Bob Patasic attended the last public hearing and shared some data with us. This time he's unable to participate, and he states that essentially that the public needs to know a very small percentage can gain control of the board, and recommends that we reference and look at his data once again.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other testimony from members of the public? All right, not seeing any. Can I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second. Give it to Sid. So Catherine and Sid, hang on. We have to take a vote. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. The public hearing is closed by unanimous vote. Now to the board.
Thank you. Clearly, I'm more than irritated by all of this and agree entirely with Lisa and Bob. I see us as a single, Montara and Moss Beach are a single community with common interests. But unfortunately, we are stuck by one complainant and a bad set of laws. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately. So we're going to make the best of it that we can. I will say that if I were, or maybe when I am running, I'm going to make it a point of making my outreach to the entire community. They might only be able to vote for one, but I can raise issues for everyone. I will say that in very large communities, like the county being divided into special districts, it saved the county from being controlled by one highly populous community. And it did change things. I can't say at this point whether it was for the better or not. It certainly will happen one way or the other. But we've only had one or two district elections, so time will tell. But that said, I hope everyone will go to the website and match this out and work on this website. And I would invite my fellow my fellow district board members, maybe what we should do is print some stuff up, go to the post office and start handing it out and asking people to mark their maps and get involved. We've done it before, and this community has really benefited from a combined action. I really want the whole community to feel like they have had the opportunity and the invitation to be involved. My guess is it would be in our newsletter. We may be sending out postcards. I don't know, but there's nothing better than personal connection. And so I think we should, as a district, print the sheets and just go out and start handing them out so that our community can make the best of a situation we did not ask for, but we are involved in.
All right, thank you. Sid?
Go ahead.
Sid?
Thank you, Scott. I attended the Board of Supervisors meeting when they were redistricting San Mateo County. And they had their own 2 committees at least that were drawing maps. And I mean, they got it down to a unity map and another map, I think was called the Espinosa map. And then at the last minute, Dave Canepa and Don Horsley decided to have an ad hoc committee, and they came up with the new map, which I don't know if you guys can see it, but it turns out that District 3 is now the whitest, richest, highest percentage of home ownership. I mean, it's the highest educated, and they did that. Probably, I'm not gonna make allegations, but because there were 2 people running from Menlo Park, they suddenly put West Menlo Park into District 3. So I hope that we will have some kind of a meeting where we're not going behind the scenes and making our own map to be self-serving. So that's my thought. And if anybody wants to take a look at our District 3, it's a lot. But the other question I have for Elizabeth is these maps that you showed on the PDF that we're looking at, it's just like a little not broken down yet. When are we going to get to see the full district map?
So that map should give people the ability to draw and have an idea of what is possible to make a balanced map.
That map, meaning which one?
The PDF.
Okay, but the one you showed on this thing we have here only had like a little, they have populations and some colored districts, but then the next one has like streets magnified, but it doesn't show where each one ends. Like the one that says there's 330 population, it looks like it's cut off, but you really can't tell from what you've presented tonight. So when are you going to have like a total map with not just like a little magnified window? It's not though.
So that's a map for people to draw on. It doesn't have the entire like zoomed in city because it's just not possible to put all of it on a map. We focused on core parts of the district that have higher populations. So it breaks down those street names so people in higher density areas can see where their streets are. At the next meeting, we'll definitely have the draft maps with URL links so you can literally zoom in on your computer and view it and see exactly where the streets are and know where the boundaries are. And of course, you'll be getting an atlas, and what we call an atlas. It's a PDF of the entire districting, along with a breakdown for each district, proposed district. So you'll see the population breakdown, ethnicity breakdown, and the deviations for all of it. So that's what you have in front of you is sort of like a project for people to work on so they can draw their own maps. When they draw it and give it back to us, then we'll put it in a map format and show it to you all so you can see exactly what it looks like and how the populations break down.
So the one that shows 0 and then where the airport is, it looks like it's the green thing with like 10 people or something. It's hard for me to see right now. Those, they're contiguous, but there's not really many people in them. So you're going to have one map with streets, and like the one that has population 330 that you chose to kind of like make a window where it's only part of it, you'll have that all designated out as each census tract.
Absolutely. Yeah, you'll see it much clearer. Yeah, your maps will look a lot more distinct and understandable than that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill.
I've got well, first of all, I love Catherine's idea that we can just hand maps out to people in real life and ask them to kind of draw their districts, and hopefully at the same time also ask what do you regard as communities of interest? What are the principles that you think ought to be in the map drawing, regardless of whether they like their own one? But I have two questions for Elizabeth. You gave us a wonderful description of what the law requires in terms of all the different things that go into communities of interest, and even for small districts, how much percentage deviation there is from district to district before you run afoul of some 10% thing. And I, as a data guy, know that once you get under 100, all of a sudden the law of large numbers makes it very difficult to actually get such small things. So it's a masterwork to be able to draw outlines on a map which are so precise. But that isn't the question I'd been asked. It's rather easy to draw lines on a map which have a certain number of people, but in current subsequent elections, if a district of 50 people, does each district of 50 people actually manage to field one candidate? Because our concern, or at least my concern, is that when a district gets too small, there may not be someone who is either competent or interested in that district. And I don't care if the line says a plus or minus 1% deviation. If nobody runs for office, we have a non-functional government. That's what I'm concerned about. And I want to hear about the success at actually running elections and getting people to run for office in these microscopic districts, and not merely what the lines look like. So that's the first question. The second one is communities of interest. You listed what looked like 25 or so ethnic group, language, religion, age, demographic. I mean, those are wonderful, and obviously for institutions which provide welfare and social services and schools and police protection and all kinds of things like that, it really matters exactly who is where, and there are lots of different interests. But as far as I know, all we do is remove sewage and provide clean water. And as far as I know, all of our customers have exactly the needs that their sewage be removed and clean water be supplied. And I don't think that need actually depends on any of those other things, except the rural-urban thing, which you pointed out. Lisa Ketchum mentioned, in fact, there is a community which looks like it is a real community, and as we talked about last week, has some verifiable interests. But other than that, I'm wondering, is like, you've told us what the state requires, and I'm saying it sounds like 95% of that is irrelevant. What have you studied which is relevant for communities of interest for our water and sanitary customers here?
Yeah. So fair points. I mean, you might not have any issues with something that's like a tourism area. However, maybe you would. It really depends on how the public articulates their argument for being a community of interest. So if there's a tourism area, I don't know if you have anything to do with, porta potties in areas that are like beaches. Sometimes they'll have deficiencies there, but that's also probably a park issue and not something you guys would do. But I would say that the most common thing we hear from special districts, particularly water districts, is homeowners and renters. Those are the predominant arguments we hear. Less likely we're going to hear from, folks who are coming from a, certain religious group or whatever. So I expect that there's going to be more of an emphasis, particularly when we're drawing maps on the communities, like homeowners or urban and rural areas.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. And what was your first question again? It was, I know it had to do with the
communities of interest. The first was about very small districts and what happens when a tiny district asks for people to run for office.
Right.
How often does that work, and at what number? Basically, there's some magic number where it starts to fail big time. I just don't know what the number is. I can only imagine.
So there aren't any statistical analyses on this, but I can tell you that one of the arguments that we hear again and again, and we've heard on the ground, is now that districts are smaller, people feel like they have the ability, an easier time to run for office. So when it's district wide, it's more intimidating. If they live in an area that feels underrepresented, they're probably not going to run because they feel like they can't win. So again, this is one of the arguments for the California Voting Rights Act, is by making it smaller, you make it easier for people to run for office. And so while it might seem daunting right now, it might be easier down the road to convince people to just run in their neighborhood, right? Versus the entire district.
Well, since you brought it up, I was actually hoping for a different kind of answer. You gave an answer about what people feel like and what they hope to. And I'm not too interested. I'm a data guy. This is a big state. We have been doing statistics on elections for a very long time. If we are allowed to talk about what people feel like might happen aspirationally, we ought to be very certain of what actually happens. So I ask again, what are the statistics on what actually happens relative to what people want to happen?
So there aren't any statistics on this, unfortunately. I do recommend that you guys reach out to other jurisdictions that have gone through this. We helped Westboro Water district a couple of years ago, and they had the exact same complaints and questions that I've been hearing from the board over the last 2 meetings, and I totally get it. It's a justifiable concern, and reaching out to them and seeing how it's worked out for them as a case study might be worth it. And
so, the numbers are there. It's just nobody's bothered to assemble them, right?
Right. And a lot of this is piecemeal. There's not a lot of attention on special or school districts when it comes to this issue.
Well, I'm imagining that for $1,000, somebody with a database connection could actually answer the question.
Oh, Catherine?
I want to address Seth. I'm offended.
Okay.
I'm very offended by your comment that this board might hide in secret.
No, I didn't say anything.
No, you did. I hope this board, you said.
I'll watch the video at the end. I hope we don't need to.
You hope we
divvy
do
it up.
not need. That's us.
Let's
I'm
bring it
offended.
down.
This board has a very, very open and transparent practice
Good.
and history. And if you confuse us with the Board of Supervisors,
I'm not.
as you appear to be,
No.
I need to have a serious talking to you at a plant sale.
You know,
All right.
I would just like to say in rebuttal, Half Bay went through their redistricting and they had to redo their map because the 2 senior areas down there, Kenyatta Cove and over on North Main Street, East Main Street, where all the senior centers are, they didn't want to be split up. So they had to kind of like rejigger it.
That's 2 major insults in one statement.
I don't mean to insult anyone. I don't know what you're saying.
That's the problem.
So,
Okay.
all right, I'm gonna
Bring it back.
I'm gonna bring it back to me, and I'm gonna have a couple of comments. One, I'm glad to see it's a little more clear tonight that the map does not include Princeton, and I was a little concerned about that last time. So that's good. I wasn't sure, and so I got to stare at it a little more closely tonight, and that's good. I do think we're going to be pretty involved. I think, Bill, to your comment about, yes, you can look at the numbers, but when the numbers get small enough, strong personalities are going to radically sway, and you're going to see, I mean, you can see some things with like surface tension in bubble sets.
Yes.
You know,
I know how to do numbers.
yeah, but but strong personalities aren't numbers, and we've seen some small communities, like I believe these folks gave us an example of a very small town with very small districts and extremely small population, and whatever happened there has probably a lot more to do with the interpersonal dynamics of people who actually know each other really well. And here we're in a community where it's entirely possible to not know people on the other side of the community. I think that's fairly normal. I think we may be in a slightly different group because we tend to step up and get involved in things, and we've been involved in things for a long time. I know people all over the community because they wanted to put a freeway over a mountain, and so that's where a whole lot of us got to know each other. So sometimes events like that can really change the dynamic. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the detailed maps where we see streets. That's going to be super important. I think most of us understand the geography well enough, but the streets are really going to be the kind of the clues. I did have the question. We got communication from Lisa today. Well, I think it was today. I read it today about the actual person count in the Pillar Ridge community recently, and I saw the way your kind of coloring book form says, what are the populations here? Are we restricted to using the actual census data, or can we use information that we know to be better?
So by law, we have to use the census data, and that's the case. If you were districting, 3 years in the future, you would still have to use 2020 census data. It's inevitable that the population changes over time. However, since we know that they were undercounted, we can include that in our 10% deviation. So we can, change the deviation so it's more fair for that community.
I'm not sure how you mean that would be applied. What kind of change do you mean specifically?
So if they were undercounted, we can populate the deviation, so they could have a negative deviation to hopefully account for the additional population that they have.
Maybe we can talk about that in more detail another time. So let's see. I see you said, but hang on. Sorry, lost my thought. Go ahead, Sid.
I was just going to address that. I did volunteer for the U.S. Census on what they call non-response follow-up. So a lot of people didn't initially turn in their census forms because of COVID. And then at the very end, the team of people that got hired to go out on non-response follow-up, I was the one that did Pillar Ridge, and I did knock on doors there of cards they said people hadn't responded yet, and I got a few more people. But Trump ended the census early, so there's very good likelihood that they were undercounted. So that is a possibility, but it could also be district-wide as well.
Yeah, no, that's actually, thank you. That's actually kind of where I was going to go. I mean, I think we have very good reason to put a lot of credence in the numbers that the Pillar Ridge community has counted. Longstanding practice, people who know the people, and I also know that during COVID there were people who just would not open a door. I was one of them, and I talked to my census taker through the door. But I mean, it was such a disruptive time. He had to come back a couple of times just to get my attention to do it. So I think our census numbers from 2020 are some of the worst in the history. So it's, I'd like to, I'm sure you'll have the data for us, but I'd really like to get into the details of the census block breakdown and take a look at that. I spent some time when we first encountered this whole issue doing that, but I trust you have much easier and more certain access to understand what you're looking at, and I look forward to that.
And what I can do is I can supplement, I can send you a document with a breakdown of all the census blocks and their populations. It's going to look a lot less legible than what that PDF has, but you can, and I wouldn't, print this out and, try to draw on it just because it's going to be very chaotic. But I do want you to see the census blocks, and I do want you to see the population so you have an idea of what we're working with.
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple comments. To the concerns raised about the just the very problematic nature of the district being forced into this set of actions. I think we're pretty uniformly agree that this is a very ham-fisted thing. I strongly support what the California Voting Rights Act is intended to do, and I would observe, like with the county supervisors districting, one of the key benefits is that it radically reduces the cost if you want to stand and run for one of the spots, because now you only need to cover 1/5 of the county, which brings that into a much more reasonable. I mean, that can cost 6 figures. To do the full county. I know some of the spends have been rather substantial, and so that's one benefit. But for the small districts, as we've all pointed out, is and I think our greatest concern, and we've been working on this for well over a year now, we want to make sure that this is something where we can interest people enough in civic duty to step forward and come join the district and help work on this. And we're just really concerned about having empty seats. And I also understand Bob's concern about how things can be unduly swayed. It's very problematic. And if anybody wants to go work with some people on going to Sacramento and saying, hey, look, we need a little more nuanced approach to achieve the CVRA goal. It's really important for a community like Pillar Ridge, and it's very concerning that we know that Pillar Ridge was very likely undercounted when that's the community of interest that most clearly stands out with respect to what the CVRA is trying to accomplish, to support a community of interest that may be underrepresented, and that they're the ones with an undercount. I have no doubt that one district will include all of Pillar Ridge, to Lisa's point. So maybe there won't be a particular problem there, but still, it's like, it just kind of makes the point. Here's a community that we want to draw everyone closer together across the whole district, and this districting is really gonna put a challenge on it. I am happy to be working with a group of people here who have a very strong interest in the overall community bond and the effective function of this organization for the entire community. So it's a good group of people to be working on a bad problem with. But welcome to the board, new board members. Bad problems are a lot of what we get to deal with. Sid?
One last question. Do the numbers that are on the map that you just passed out to us, are those the total population? Because on this county map, they showed, total population and citizen voting age population, voter registration as of November 2020, and voter turnout. And then they even break it down to what turnout was in 2018. So are we just going by the large body count, including children?
So on that map that you have, that is just the total population, because that is what is used to balance the different districts. When you get any kind of draft map, so that includes a draft map from the public, so we'll receive that, you will get all of that other information. So you'll get the citizen voting age population, the breakdown of the demographics, the line boundaries. So you'll get a lot more than just the total population.
Okay, but for our purposes, we're going by the gross population to start with.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Scott, since you brought up the idea of going to Sacramento and trying to talk some sense into the legislature, I'd like to volunteer for that. Ever since I first heard about this law impacting us, I realized my best work as a data science and algorithm guy was in figuring out how to draw the equations to make a gentle failover from when you have thousands or millions of events like clicks and conversions and online advertising, but fewer and fewer, and now maybe you only have a dozen or 3. How do you get your algorithm to gently deal with less and less data? So I actually know the mathematics. It's a mathematical question, of what you do when your districts get too small. And I would love to tell the legislature essentially the mathematical answers to it.
All right, thank you, Bill. All right, we've been asked to direct staff and consultants to prepare the draft district maps. If we have no disagreement, let's offer that direction to staff.
Mm-hmm.
Thank our consultant. Thank you, Elizabeth. And let's move on to the next item. So, new business 1, review and possible action concerning disagreement about Sewer Authority Mid-Coast fiscal year 2023-2024 general budget.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So I think we have, since quite some time, a situation at the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side, and it feels like it is somewhat peaking at this point. It's a disagreement between the member agencies. However, this is, I'm going to say, rather a surprise disagreement because, well, ultimately, we're talking about really the SAM budget failing at this point, and that is really due to Half Moon Bay's history of disapproving any or not wanting to approve any improvements on the SAM-owned intertie pipeline system. When SAM first was formed, it was made clear in the JPA that the pipeline is part of the system that all 3 member agencies maintain. The original question where the plant would be located was essentially addressed through this inclusion of the pipeline. So the plant could have been anywhere in the system. However, the pipeline that joins the member agencies together was agreed upon to be part of the JPA. All that was confirmed through the lawsuit that the city filed and lost. At this point, we've seen already a number of failures of the pipeline. The first one in 2017, also a time when the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side already should have improved the pipe, and where the other members attempted to improve the pipe, and that was blocked. So the result was a large spill in 2017. The outcome was that SAM was sued by an environmental rights group, ERF, and entered a consent decree that requires replacement of the pipe by 2024, which means we have 1 year left to replace this pipe. Accordingly, SAM put a budget together that contains funds for the pipe replacement. We saw a second rupture this January. So since January, SAM has prepared a budget that includes the funds towards the intertie pipeline repair. And however, and that went through the finance committee, it went through the managers' meetings. So this was long discussed and prepared at SAM, and in ultimately last minute, when this budget was supposed to be approved to be sent to the member agencies, the city is essentially not participating. They sent a letter through their city manager, Matthew Chittister, stating that they would not participate and would not approve a budget that contains funds for this pipe replacement. I think it is time that the public knows about what is going on. It is a rather convoluted topic that's not easily digestible. We've seen now in yesterday's Half Moon Bay review a letter to the editor from Mayor Half Moon Bay Mayor Penrose, and as Scott indicated, he pointed to one major factor that was left out. I'm just going to say, I don't think there was really any. There was not a lot of facts included. I think we see this all throughout the news today. It's part of our times that things are simply omitted, information that is important. But I've seldom seen such a statement that does not include really what's going on at SAM at all. So this is a very it's another attempt to just construe a situation and a picture that is far away from the truth. So I believe it is time that this agency needs to get this information out to the public. So first step was that we put an agenda item on this meeting that allows for an open discussion about the situation at the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast site. We've also prepared a resolution that we believe this board would support, that summarizes the facts that could be distributed to the member agencies and lays out Montara's position. And when the board is ready, I'm happy to share this resolution and walk through it, read it out if need be. So I'm going to suggest to hand it back to the board. And again, we have a resolution that we actually would like the board to consider adopt tonight for distribution to the other member agencies. Thank you.
So the draft, this is what is it distributed in paper form? Do we have that? Is that what that second paper says? I'm just curious.
No, we don't have it in paper form.
Okay.
I can share it on screen.
In the resolution?
No, I'm just asking what we have.
Okay.
Love to have something in front of me for the discussion, but
Do you want me to share it on screen?
I have
that
that form here for the resolution.
no, that's okay. That's okay. I've got it open here. I just wondered what we had in the room. All right. Well, let's have some discussion. I have a lot of things I want to say, but let's first. You know what? Let's first hear from members of the public. Let's go to Jim.
Can the maybe I didn't hear this part from Clemens, but can the resolution be shared with the public and the newspaper? It isn't just for the other two districts, correct? It's for the whole public, Clemens?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. I'm saying I'm ready to share it now on screen, and the plan is we're asking to share also this resolution with the member agencies and the public.
Okay.
Can copies be sent, or can copies be made and mailed to other interested parties also?
But it'll be a public document, so yes, of course.
Okay.
If we approve it, that's correct. Greg?
Do we want to see this resolution before you invite public comment?
Okay, Clemens, if you could put it up.
Well, I thought we were going to comment about the issues in general and then look at the specific resolution addressing them. That's what how it was phrased first.
That's so organized.
That's fine. Let's do that. Okay. I want to make sure we heard from the public. The public would like to see this. They can see the thing that we have, at least as much as fits on the screen. So, Sid?
Well, I'll kick it off. It wasn't a surprise to me. If you watch a SAM meeting, you could see they were leading up and dragging their heels for weeks, if not months, to approve that budget. So, and if you've watched SAM meetings in the past, you know that they don't want to pay for anything if it's not within their city limits. So that wasn't a surprise at all. It's wrong, but that's my opinion.
Well, as Greg pointed out, 1/3 of their city is in Granada Sanitary District. So they won't even pay for everything that's in their city limits.
You know, Clemens, you don't have to make it 135% probably.
So,
I'm just trying to see that, folks can read it. I'm scrolling through, we could read it out
I
loud.
want to throw out something in general.
Mhm.
This goes back to the last SAM meeting. It became clear that Half Moon Bay, under no circumstance, is willing to contribute to do anything about the force main for the forthcoming fiscal year. They absolutely refuse. The El Granada position is slightly different. The El Granada position says we may approve a fund, and since you have put forward a $3.5 million infrastructure number, we just want to make sure when we see that number and it's all going to the Intertie project, we just want to make sure that those projects that are pending that still need to be in this budget somehow so that they can be continued, that you put some numbers together so that you get a better idea of this $3.5 million taking in what, not only the force main, but also the projects that are carried forward. So we still need to convince El Granada with the numbers that show clearly out of the $3.5 million, how much would possibly be needed initially for the start of the IPS upgrade or maintenance, and what number is being carried forward from those projects that are pending that have not yet been paid for and that need to come out of this same $3.5 million that we now all agree should be the next infrastructure budget. So that's where the matter gets somewhat complicated, because we have been trying to get out of El Granada specifically what it is that they want to be convinced, and we do not really receive a very clear answer.
Bill?
I only read this a couple hours ago, even though it arrived yesterday. It's the op-ed piece by Mayor Debbie Penrose titled "Sam's Budget Asks City Ratepayers to Pay for Pipeline Serving Midcoast." And that title, as far as I can tell, is actually true. The SAM budget does ask city ratepayers to pay for a pipeline. My understanding is that 20 years ago or so, Half Moon Bay strong-armed Montara, which had its own ready-to-roll sewage plant, into putting in a giant long pipeline and sending all our sewage down there. And the way that happened was Half Moon Bay agreed to share the costs of the pipeline. So either I have been vastly misinformed, or the thing that Mayor Debbie Penrose is complaining about is in fact something that they asked for 20 years ago, signed a contract for, and are legally obliged to do. In which case, this is kind of a farce of an op-ed piece, because it's acting as if she's obligated to do something she's legally required not to do. The other piece in here, which surprises me, was essentially the claim that, Montara is objecting to us paying under protest, which in fact Montara is objecting, and they are asking to pay under protest. But my impression from the ZRF lawsuit is paying under protest is not a legally cognizable thing. And if we are going to agree to something which lawyers and judges say is nonsense, we are getting ourselves in trouble. So for them to ask us to do something legally nonsensical is not doing us or them any good. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I would love Ms. Penrose or their lawyer, somebody from Half Moon Bay, to talk to me in person and explain this. It makes no sense. What I'm reading in the paper is non-understandable. It doesn't work.
Let me offer one correction. It was over 45 years ago, and we operated pretty well over decades, according to the contract that all three parties signed, and it operated to the terms of the contract for decades. This is a recent development. And one other thing I might just note, we're in litigation because they decided to appeal the lawsuit that they lost. So talking to the individuals a little fraught with danger. So it's both parties are, all the parties are represented by counsel. So Christine might have something else to offer on that. But for the moment, let's go to Catherine.
Thank you. There's two parts that the public, I hope, will be aware of. One is that what they are quibbling about is that they have asked Montara and Grenada, they being Half Moon Bay, to sign a stipulation that if they win the lawsuit, they can claw back the money they spent to repair this pipeline. If this had been made prior to the Superior Court judgment, which it was, but the Superior Court judgment upheld the SAM budget, or the SAM Joint Powers Authority, which says Half Moon Bay is responsible for its flow share, how much it uses the SAM plant for the infrastructure of SAM. When they filed the lawsuit in 2017, they were at about 52% of the flow into the plant. Now they are up close to 63%. So they are being asked to cover 63% of this project. Had we done it in 2019 when the agreement was reached, they probably would have been at about 55%. But they decided in 2017 to sue. But they can approve the budget, and we could negotiate about the stipulation if the budget were passed. But what they're doing is strong-arming the citizens from Frenchman's Creek North into saying that they can bring some kind of action in the future to try and claw back this money. And because the Ecological Rights Foundation lawsuit that we're talking about, which replaces the SAM force main that is located in Montara, commonly known as the Montara force main, but it's not, it is the SAM force main in Montara. I lost the thought. They have decided that they don't want to pay for it. The ERF lawsuit to replace that is about federal clean water laws. Now that we know the pipe has broken and spilled 4 million gallons, if we don't act quickly to replace it, some decision makers are facing federal charges and could go to jail.
Under the Clean Water Act.
Under the Clean Water Act.
Decision makers being
Board members. Now, Montara has been insistent that we will approve the budget as presented. I did make a suggestion to Half Moon Bay that we would be happy to sign their stipulation if it were amended to add that if they lost, they would pay Montara and Grenada's court fees for this entire case. I have not yet received a reply. But they could continue, we could negotiate over the stipulation if they would sign the budget, agree to the budget instead of strong-arming us. Because they have the right to vote under protest without our permission. They don't need us to do it. So I don't really understand their rationale. They haven't been able to explain it except to say so that us simpletons up in the wealthy enclave of Montara, oh, by the way, wealthy enclave of Montara is a quote from the Half Moon Bay brief on the lawsuit. Us simpletons in the wealthy enclave of Montara could not possibly understand any real reason. And so they're just saying, do it or we won't sign the budget. Granada is more nuanced in that they want to see the actual cost of what this project will be. The problem is that instead of tackling this as an emergency project, when the pipe broke in early January and just replacing the entire pipeline, Half Moon Bay decided that Sam should go out for a request for proposal. And then they wanted to put out, so they sent out a request for proposal, which took about 6 weeks. And of 10 agencies or companies that were contracted, only one responded. Only one. But they have to do this request for proposal analysis now. So we don't know what the various elements of this pipeline maintenance project will be, except Half Moon Bay's engineer has said it wants to expand the pipeline and change the footprint and turn it into a project which in the language of the JPA means Half Moon Bay is no longer responsible for new projects. And so it's trying to wiggle out of the pain for this in two ways. One, by slowing it down and expanding the footprint and the redundancies and making it a bigger project. And two, by getting us to sign this stipulation. And meanwhile, Sam has until July 1 to get a budget together. And we are trying to deal with the Ecological Rights Foundation because the project, this pipeline maintenance replacement was supposed to be done by June 24 in 2024. According to an engineer I spoke with, it could be done, it could be halfway done by now if we had tackled it as an emergency project and just replaced the pipeline. But instead, we are negotiating now with ERF from a position of weakness, saying, oh, please extend your deadline for 3 years, because we just can't quite get our act together to get it done as a simple in-place pipe replacement. So there's so many different moving elements. And the main one is we've got to get the budget passed. We can negotiate about the elements and the cost of these things later. A budget is not a straitjacket. We are not bound by it. We can go for adjustments up, or we can not spend money. But Granada wants to know what all the detailed costs are going to be, and we won't know that until sometime in July. The fiscal year starts July 1. So it's very convoluted. There's a lot of power plays going on. And meanwhile, the entire community, including Half Moon Bay, is being held at risk for increased fines and costs. And I'm trying to make that simple. I should have done it on the whiteboard. I'm sorry.
Could I speak to that, or you guys still want to say stuff?
I'm sorry.
Comments?
I'm sorry, Greg. What were we saying?
Are you ready for public comments now that we've seen the?
No. No, hang on. All right. I just want to try a summary, a really brief summary, because I take no issue with the detail that you lay out, and as we know, there's more.
There's even more.
But I'm going to observe that Half Moon Bay is playing brinksmanship, using a game of chicken trying to put one lawsuit that they created and have dragged out for years and then appealed even after they lost in one of the most thorough drubbings I've seen in a court ruling, pitting us between that lawsuit and the ERF lawsuit and saying, if you don't want to take the risk that ERF comes at us and is really angry and insists on taking us to the woodshed over not doing what we, the three agencies and SAM all together. I mean, we're the owners. We, Granada and Half Moon Bay, are the owners of the Sewer Authority Midcoast site. They're saying, we're willing to play that game of chicken with ERF, who honestly does good work. They're if you go look at some of their other lawsuits, you're like, they look legit. They're really out there trying to do the ecological good thing. No doubt we know we spilled. We came to an agreement with them. SAM and its owners came to an agreement, took it to a court, and the judge ratified that agreement. And now Half Moon Bay is saying, game of chicken. I'm gonna use these two lawsuits. And that's like, Half Moon Bay is lawsuit happy and happy to use it to lead to the huge drama that Catherine so carefully walked us through. But it really comes down to, they don't want to pay. And they're willing to put the whole agency, the whole coast side at risk of ERF coming to the court and saying they're not living up to the contractual agreement that was the settlement in that ERF lawsuit. That downside for the community, it's ridiculous that we should even have to consider not making good on that agreement that settled that lawsuit. That's done and done. The obligation of the owners of the Sewer Authority Midcoast side now is to get the work done.
That's right.
And Half Moon Bay is saying, we're willing to put all that at risk to try to make our point about the lawsuit that we created and lost, because we just insist on having that last word. And we insist that we're right, and no court's going to tell us that we're wrong. And if it sounds confusing trying to follow all of that drama that Catherine so carefully laid out, it's because it is confusing. And that confusion comes from one place. All right. Now, Greg, thank you for being patient.
I want to read a quote from 1976 that I think you'll all appreciate, but especially Bill. This came from my research into the formation of the agency and the grant state granted. Mr. Robert Magnaskow was appalled that a sewer plant functioning at 50% capacity would be abandoned and the raw sewage would be pumped 9 miles for treatment. That was what was forced upon Montara. Just so you know, and that was a 1976 quote. Just a few notes and a question. A couple of meetings ago, as Sid pointed out, Half Moon Bay raised this stipulation objection. But then the meeting after that, they came back with a letter to try and justify, they're not approving it. And they raised the issue of borrowing to smooth costs, which at today's interest rates will add 75 to 150% of the cost of the assets. That's a financing decision which is up to each agency. I don't see any reason why we should be dragged into funding something that way if we don't have to. Half Moon Bay can decide to finance their own contribution. Remember, the SAM attorney made a statement in one of those meetings that really no stipulation should be required, that Half Moon Bay could just vote under protest or whatever it had done before. I don't know what changed, and this is a question. Did something in the judge's ruling of the lawsuit cause Half Moon Bay to advance from approving things under protest that they had in prior years to now requiring prior stipulation? I think that's worth knowing. And then to the issue that's bothering Granada, we know this is going to cost 10.5 million or maybe $1 million more, depending upon whether the pipe is made larger, et cetera, over 3 years. So from a business perspective, laying out a budget that says, I'm probably going to spend $3.5 million over the next 3 years, details to be, developed pending, is what I would call a normal practice. I don't see why Granada is worried about that, unless that puts pressure on them in public about their rates or something. But it just seems normal course of business to me to approve a ballpark that meshes with what you know overall to be true, and then to refine that. But you go into this with a clear expectation you're going to be spending $3.5 million over 3 years. I don't understand the problem. And I do endorse the release of this resolution or information immediately. In fact, I'd like a copy right now. I want to master this tonight before I'm on the radio tomorrow. I hope you will. I hope you will let it go.
Yeah, let's just make sure everybody finishes. it's just, I'll observe as I'm trying to hand the mic around. People, all of us tend to have this habit of pausing before we sum up, and it can look like we're done. And so just let everybody wind it down. Peter, your turn.
Yeah, I just want to bring in one more factor, and that is the fact that the lawsuit that is now the appeal by the city of Half Moon Bay, is not going to be decided on by the judge until July next year, which brings us into the next fiscal year, not the 23-24, but the 24-25 fiscal year. If the decision by the judge after the appeal is that Half Moon Bay should indeed pay, then they can only start contributing towards that. They will only start contributing towards that for replacement of the IP in that 24-25 year. That should really upset the ERF, because the attorney of SAM has clearly said that if ERF in the negotiations that are now taking place does not find a line item in our financials that spells out that we are investing in the replacement of the force main, that would be a reason for them to come to us and levy a penalty. These penalties are huge, and we should not get into that situation.
Thank you, Peter. Jim Harvey.
Thank you, Scott. I believe the JPA has specific language that explains what happens when a member agency doesn't participate within the JPA. Can that aspect and language be included in this resolution, or I think it's an important component.
Thanks, Jim. The where we are right now, the budget has not been approved for circulation to the member agencies, so that's not right. That's not yet.
I'd like to make a quick comment.
Yeah. Sid had her hand up, and then we'll get back to you.
I was just going to say that I really think this really boils down to the fact that Half Moon Bay doesn't have the money. I've watched some of their city council meetings. It looked like they have $5 million in reserves, but by a certain date, it's going to all disappear based on other projects that they're trying to fund. And I think it's just spin on their part to put this article in the paper, and I don't know what we can do about it. We're always the nice guy, it seems like. I mean, we are the ones that hold back our sewage so they can use 100% of the plant during wet weather months. I don't know. I don't have a clue, but it's not right.
Catherine?
I asked Keishan, the general manager at SAM, how much has been spent between 2017 and the end of this current budget year, or currently, on the intertie pipeline of SAM's that is in Montara and partially in El Granada. and the number is about $6,200,000. Now, Half Moon Bay, over that time, probably would claim that it should get back 50 if it were to reclaim that money. If it won the lawsuit, it would mean that Montara and Granada would owe them roughly $3.5 million. That doesn't count this new pipeline replacement, which is going to be anywhere between 10 and $13 million over 3 years. I've been talking to various engineers, and if we do it over 3 years, the expected cost increase per year, cumulative over 3 years, is 20% per year. So at 3.5 million this year, it's 4.2 in the next fiscal year, and up over 5 in the third fiscal year. And that's part of the reason for Montara and this resolution saying, no, we believe on good advice from very good engineers that this can be done in a year. But the other 2 member agencies have decided to dedicate their funding in other directions and not to taking care of public health and averting a risk. And my analysis of this is, and it's not a numeric analysis, it's not a data analysis, it's from long time observing of things, is ERF is a serious risk. And that's why Half Moon Bay is trying to play chicken. They think we'll cave. And I have talked to various constituents of this district, and they have supported what this board is doing.
Comments?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on what Sid said, stating that the city does not have the money. I want to say that the city planned to spend $1.5 million on SAM infrastructure projects. We've spent similar amounts in past years, and the comments from the city only changed when the priority changed at SAM, and this project, it became clear this project has to be done this year, or started this year. So the city planned to spend the $1.5 million on the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side, and is only saying no to the type of improvement that is done, not to the money.
I thank you. I wanted to add one thing, and you're right. I mean, the northern communities have in that you said we hold back the water. Technically speaking, and this actually goes to the real bottom line point, the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side crew operates the system, and what happens is that water's held and backs up the pipeline to the north when Half Moon Bay is sending far more into the plant than they're allowed to send. But the crew is making the decision about spilling the least possible amount in those situations. Sometimes that means we spill up here, but if Half Moon Bay were to spill, it could be far more based on a whole hydrodynamics business. So I just want to be really clear, because it really does go to the issue of the ownership, the joint ownership, that they're taking advantage of their northern neighbors to behave in the way they do on the money, on the flow, and the risk, the crazy risk to not making good on what a lawsuit settlement. It's like bonds. There are some things you just don't mess with. You pay because, oh my gosh, you don't ever want to think about the consequences of not. The settlement in this kind of lawsuit, on the kind of basis that it's about, you don't mess with that. They're playing with live electrical wires in a rainstorm here. This is what I'd like to do now is we've got in front of us a draft resolution. Clemens, I wonder if you could put it up again and show the 5 points at the bottom. I think we've covered a lot of what's in the recitations up top, the whereases, of how we got here. This is the 5 things that this would say. And here I would say it'd be okay for the people at home if you made it smaller.
I'm just going to read it out, these 5 points.
Okay.
The foregoing recitals are hereby incorporated as true statements of fact, findings, and conclusions by the board. That's the first point. Second, the approval hereby is made and restated with the reservation of all rights by this district to recover from the city of Half Moon Bay all other consequential damages from said city's failure to participate in the consent decree and or fund essential IPS projects. Third, the city of Half Moon Bay is hereby notified that it shall be held fully answerable for any and all sanitary sewer overflows or other adverse occurrences and the consequences thereof arising from its failure to approve funding to comply with the consent decree, including, without limitation, liability for personal injuries and property damage, citizen suits, civil penalties and liabilities, assessments, and criminal liability. Fourth, authorize the manager to distribute information related to this resolution to the communities served by SAM. And the fifth point, the district secretary is hereby authorized and directed to transmit a certified copy of this resolution to Sewer Authority Mid-Coastside, Granada Sanitary District, and the city of Half Moon Bay.
Discussion?
I have another question. Things don't get cheaper over time, so I don't understand why they're stalling. But they also have never asked or tried to make any effort to have their own wet weather storage either. So why do we let the plant turn off our wet weather flow when they don't even have a provision for it?
Well, it's a problem, but I really trust our crew to make the best trade-off decisions. But it sure is frustrating.
Yes.
To your point. Absolutely. Catherine?
Let me add that I have been asking for that for many years, and when I got on SAM in 2017, I've been vocal since then about that. I have spoken with engineers. They have said that would be the best solution. I have made the suggestion to Half Moon Bay and been told absolutely no way, we will never consider it.
Oh, one other question.
Hang on. Let me go to Clemens and then we'll come back to you, Sid.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to attend a conference call this week with the Sewer Authority Mid-Coastside and essentially contractors for Cal OES that are helping through the FEMA process that the Sewer Authority Mid-Coastside is looking to improve the actual plant, electrical, etc. And there it was made clear that the entire scope of the project changes because the city cannot hold back its own sewage. So the fact that the plant essentially cannot be turned off, the sewage cannot be withheld from that section, requires a much larger approach. I encourage to get the information from the SAM general manager.
Thank you for that, Clemens. Sid, you had one more?
I think I know the answer, but SAM itself cannot take out a grant from like San Mateo County or anything, the way Half Moon Bay bought that 880 Stone Pine Corporation yard with an iBank loan. But then they later got money from the county as well. So I'm just wondering if there's any chance, not us as a district, but SAM as an entity, they cannot borrow or get grants?
According to the JPA, they can go after funding, but it takes a vote of in a positive vote from every district plus one.
So then we could have to go after our own funding if Half Moon Bay steps away and doesn't want to fund the IPS that's in Montara.
We're always going to go after grant funding and other sources for anything that we can. We regularly do. The success rate of those kind of things, we've been more successful than others, but it's still very low success rate. At SAM, without the three agencies concurring, it's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think I'm pretty satisfied and would be very happy to put my name on the signature line of this. But how say the rest of you?
I move we adopt the resolution.
Okay, so Sid and Bill with the motion in the second.
And as secretary, I will be happy to distribute it.
So we're voting on a resolution. Let's do a roll call vote. Peter?
Aye.
Catherine?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Sid?
Yes.
And I vote aye as well. The motion carries 5-0. The resolution is approved. I'd like to thank Clemens and the rest of the staff who helped put this together. This kind of thing is rare and not the kind of thing we have a lot of practice putting together. And getting all the recitations, all the whereases where we can, stand behind them and to make the findings. This is hard work. And it's unfortunate that Half Moon Bay is putting everybody in this spot, but there's a time to speak up and make it plain. Okay, back to finding the agenda here. Okay, reports. Sewer Authority McCo side. Catherine?
I think we've had the report.
Thank you.
I will say we had a very interesting budget meeting. And for those of you who understand budgeting and accounting, I suggest you watch the meeting and come to your own conclusions about what happened.
All right, Mid-Coast Community Council, I'm guessing Greg?
Yeah, hi. We produced a telecommunications report. We sent it to every local agency. We're getting endorsements. We got one from SAM. We're getting one from Cabrillo. I'm hoping we can get an endorsement from Montara of the findings of that report, but that's of course up to you. If you believe we have the telecommunications kinds of problems that were cited in that report, we'd love to be able to add your endorsement to it so we can take it to the county and upstream to the state government for action. We're doing a stormwater report as well. Thank you. We already have a contribution from Montara and the sewer engineer on the impact of stormwaters. That will be part of the Montara chapter of that report. We'll send you a draft copy for review before we send it out to anybody. I just want to mention the top of Montara Mountain is going to be closed beginning May 30th for about 9-10 days. They have a problem getting fuel to the backup generators on the cell towers at the top of the mountain. The Department of Emergency Management is treating this as a major problem. If power's cut off and we don't have the backup generators working, the entire communications infrastructure out here is going to crash, including even the CERT emergency backup that we currently use, where the people with the walkie-talkies talk to the ham radio operators. So we would be really cut off. So it's a pretty big deal. We had a long session on priorities for the MCC. I'll write an article on it. I'll send it to you guys just in case you want to add to the list. We, of course, got pushback from the county, the usual, just pick 3. But the feeling on the council is we've been paying our taxes to the county for a long time, much more than a city gives to the county. And we're not getting the services that we deserve. And to find out whether or not we're right, we're asking for an audit of the flow of funds from the Mid-Coast to and from the county. And I had the simple thought that why isn't there a budget for the Mid-Coast? Why doesn't the county have a budget for what they do for us? We're going to be attending an emergency preparedness, I don't know, what do you want to call it, fair on June 10th. We're going to have a booth for the MCC, and to attract people to show up, instead of handing out buttons, we're going to have a suggestion box. So people can put their gripes in, And we'll also present some of our work on stormwater and telecommunications. There's a lot going on in transportation issues. Surfers Beach and the future of Highway 1 is of major concern, and I think it needs to be addressed now because it's going to take a long time to fix. We're going to have an update on fentanyl and public health. We're going to bring up the issue of testing for dangerous substances at SAM, which you may recall Half Moon Bay refused to pay for. I'm trying to get the public health department to pay for funding the detection of dangerous substances at SAM. I hope to hear soon. We're going to have a presentation on the new Moss Beach Fire Station from the Coastside Fire Protection District. And we're also going to hear about the Quarry Park off-leash dog pilot. That's it for me, unless there's any questions.
I have a comment.
Please.
Please make sure that the fire district pays attention to its lighting, its egress, its noise levels in the neighborhood, and make sure that those are enforceable, not just nice to haves.
You didn't watch the meeting yesterday because we had 2 slides on that very issue.
Thank you.
It's on YouTube.
And I'd like to volunteer that I own some instruments for measuring essentially the toxicity of lighting in the flicker spectrum and the light spectrum. And I will not charge for using those instruments, so they have no excuse.
That is great. I knew your degree would come in handy somewhere.
It's a matter of degree.
All right. I'm a little surprised in that exchange. We didn't hear any alma maters referenced, but I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity for that later. Catherine, anything on CSDA or LAFCO?
No.
Okay. Attorney's report, Christine?
No report.
All right. Director's reports? Anybody? No? Okay. General
I'll
manager?
just say, please watch the SAM board meeting on Monday night. Sign in. We'll probably have lots of bandwidth. And please make your comments known during public comment. This is a serious issue, and nobody says anything, and it's going to hit everybody in the pocket. I've run the numbers. It could be thousands of dollars per household per year in the long run.
Clemens, did I have a pending thing for you?
Yeah, so no report from me, but a question to Greg. By when do you need the telecommunications comments?
I would like to wrap it up within a week or so, but I understand you got a lot going on. I already have letters coming from the others. I was hoping to wrap a bow around this and take it to Senator Becker and Assemblyman Berman and Anna Eshoo just about at the end of May.
You'll have something by next week.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Clemens. I appreciate that. I was trying to figure out how we might move on that in short order. I think you actually have the clearest view into how it affects operations and the safety of the community. So coming from you is actually better than coming from the board on this, I think.
I would say we should add a comment about having accessibility for fuel for generators.
Greg, I'll talk to you later. I had questions about the access difficulty, but let's say.
Just one more comment, since somebody brought up Anna Eshoo. She will be in Half Moon Bay on Saturday at they call it the Boys and Girls Club. It's the gymnasium, and they're having a farm worker event, and I think Ray Mueller is going to be there as well. So I think that's a good opportunity to hobnob with politicians and even Half Moon Bay politicians. Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right. We have some closed session items. So I'll go over those and then I'll end the public session. We've got conference with legal counsel on the existing litigation where Half Moon Bay just really wants us to pay their bills. Montara Water and Sanitary District v. the Dow Chemical Company, a long-running matter. Conference with legal counsel anticipated litigation, 2 potential cases of initiation of litigation, 1 potential case of significant exposure to litigation, public employee performance evaluation, and conference with labor negotiators with respect to our general manager. and then conference with real property negotiators on the property at 771 Rivera Road, Montara, California. And if we take any action, we'll report out afterwards. And with that, we'd like to thank our everyone who attended or watches this later. Thank you very much for your participation. We're eager to have more participation from you. And a reminder, if any of you out there have any thoughts about possibly stepping up and into public service as an elected representative on this board, we want to encourage you. With that, let's go into recess and end the public session. Thank you.